I played well, I thought. It wasn't the best round of my life, but I finished 18 holes with a score of just 7 over par, which was pretty good. For the past few years, my friend Matt and I have been playing golf together a couple times a month. He was about 10 years older than me. We met when my wife Becky and I moved into our current home 6 years ago. Matt is a big guy and has the gift of gab. He is involved in real estate and is doing very well, although sometimes there are periods of calm. His wife, Pam, a tall, thin blonde, stayed home and raised their son, Chet. He had recently turned 18 and was finishing high school before entering university. Pam and Becky became immediate friends and met several times a week. Becky is also blonde, with straight hair, which usually suits her, except when she really wants a little curl and volume, which currently ends just below her shoulders. She keeps herself in good shape. There are a few sags and soft spots, but nothing more than what you would expect from a 41-year-old woman. To me, she is still the most beautiful woman in the world, or at least she was before all this started. Guys, you know how it is when you hear those words. We need to talk. Never before had a wife said those words in a way that meant good news to the poor husband. So when Becky said them to me that fateful Saturday afternoon, I immediately braced myself for bad news. I'm sure we all do this. We try to think about what it could be. I didn't go into the garage, so my first thought was that something had happened to her car. But that wouldn't be very scary. I made good money as an engineer, so if it was something tangible, it could be easily fixed. And she knew it. Then I decided that it was something personal, like family. All of our parents were alive, as were 3 of our 8 grandparents. Maybe something happened to one of them? Or perhaps it was our daughter, Holly. Holly was very close to her mother, and we often joked that she was Mini-Me, my wife. She had Becky's straight blonde hair and a love of shopping. She had recently started dating a couple of months ago. She had turned 18 and had a boyfriend named Dean who seemed nice enough. As far as I knew, there was no physical relationship between them, but perhaps fathers are not always aware of such things. Could Holly be pregnant? Damn it. This, of course, explains Becky's gloomy tone, although it could be dealt with. Or maybe Becky is pregnant. Imagine being a father again at my age. I liked it the first time and thought I would continue to do so, but maybe Becky thought I wouldn't be happy with it. Of course, all of this went through my head in a matter of seconds, and I had almost convinced myself that one of the women in my life was pregnant when I sat down at the kitchen table across from my wife of 18 years. Henry, my dear, you know how much I love you, right? Of course, Beck. I didn't doubt it for a minute. I tried to stay cheerful, not wanting her to be afraid to tell me about the new baby, which I was sure was coming soon, but doubt crept into my head. Why would she ask if I know how much she loves me unless she's going to tell me something that will make me doubt it? And I do, Henry. I love you with all my soul and always will, and I look forward to us spending the rest of our lives together. This is what I always wanted. Me too, honey. But I guess this wasn't meant to be a mutual admiration society meeting. What's the matter? Henry, we have been together for 20 years, 18 of them as husband and wife. I love you more and more every day, and all this time I have happily dedicated my life to caring for you and our wonderful daughter. With the exception of some visits to friends, I asked for almost nothing for myself. Do you agree? It was clearly not about Holly, but about Becky wanting something that she thought I might object to. She never expressed a desire to have another child, and I was quickly losing confidence in this theory. I agree, honey. You always put Holly and me first, although we encouraged you to make time for yourself. Yes, and I know about it. And this is one way to understand how much you love me, and why I believe that you will pamper me now. Well, I'm listening. Henry, as you know, everything changes with age. Our bodies change, our energy levels change, our sex drive changes. You are a wonderful lover, Henry, and always have been, but you know as well as I that, as you age, you are less and less able to handle it. It's just a natural part of aging, and I understand that. I really didn't like how suddenly things turned out. Probably the last thing a man would want is for his wife to talk about his masculinity, or at least the lack thereof. I had a bad feeling. She continued. Not knowing how to respond to this, I simply nodded that I understood what she was talking about. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, which I assumed would have to do with some solution to this problem. For me, it's the other way around. I find myself needing something almost every day. Don't you think I feel the same way, Becky? I love you and want you to be taken care of. but you can't completely fight biology. I know and understand this, and I don't hold it against you in any way. It's just the nature of aging. Okay, Becky, now that you've pointed out my sexual shortcomings and done your best to minimize them, are you going to get to the point of our conversation? As she talked about my inability to fully satisfy her, I came to the conclusion that this train was racing, asking permission to have an affair. I was almost right. Henry, please understand, I'm not trying to belittle you, I'm just trying to explain. It's very difficult for me to talk about this, and I hope that you won't be too angry and we can continue to talk about it like we did before. I didn't say anything and didn't move. I was just waiting. Henry, I have a lover. This has been going on for almost a year now. I was stunned. I couldn't even bring myself to answer, so she kept talking to fill the silence. We meet a couple of times a week. I do not love him. I love only you. I tried very hard so that you wouldn't find out anything and that nothing would change for you at home. I know very well when you are in the mood and plan accordingly. You always had me when you wanted me, and nothing about that will change. You are my husband and your needs will always come first. So you intend to continue in the same spirit? Yes, Henry, I intend to. As I said, my needs have increased and I need to do this to meet them. But I want you to be sure that this will not change the way I feel about you or about our love-making together. Who is he? I'm not going to tell you this, Henry. You don't need to know who he is and nothing good will come of it. It's not one of your friends or someone you work with. This is just a person I met. And you expect me to just accept it because I love you? Yes. I know that you love me and want me to be happy and content. And I know that you do not notice any changes, and I tried very hard to make sure of this. Also, the alternative would be that you would have to pay me alimony and child support and live somewhere else. I love you and don't want you to suffer like this. It will be better for everyone if we just continue to live as before. I tried my best to remain calm on the outside, but inside I was furious. How dare she threaten me with the consequences of divorce? Holly might not be too happy about living with a mother who cheats on her father. Well, it sounds better to you anyway. You've got it all figured out, haven't you? You took the first page from the handbook of lying and deceitful wives and played me crazy. You hooked me, and now you can leave me dangling in the wind. Please don't look at it that way, honey. Don't call me that bitch. Henry, being angry and using obscene language won't make things any easier. That may be true, but it definitely makes me feel better. I know this is hard to hear, really, but this will not affect us in any way. You didn't notice and won't notice in the future. It's just something I do for myself to satisfy my needs. It won't take anything away from you. It's the same as if I did volunteer work in my free time. Okay? Let's assume that I believe in this and I don't. But let's assume that I do. Why now? What do you mean? Well, all this time you managed to lie and deceive me. I never lied to you, Henry. When we got married, you swore to be only with me, which is a violation of a promise, if not a lie. But without telling me, you've basically lied to me every day since you first slept with that asshole. He's not an asshole. He is very cute. I wouldn't date an asshole. He seduces and has sex with married women. That alone makes him an asshole. Well, for the record, he didn't seduce me. I came to him myself. It just kept getting better and better. So, that means you're even more of a traitor than I thought. Henry, I ignored her. Then let's get back to my question. Why are you telling me about this now? You made me trust you. You deceived me for a whole year, so why are you telling me about this now? Like I said, Henry, I plan to spend every day of the rest of my life showing you how much I love you and how grateful I am to you for allowing me to do this one thing for myself. But the exception is that he takes me to Hawaii for a week, as if on the anniversary of our first date together. Are you kidding me? Is it too much that it doesn't affect us? You leave for a week with your lover and I sit at home and work to support you? So should I welcome you with open arms when you return? What the hell did I do to you to deserve such disrespect from you? You didn't do anything, Henry, and this is not disrespectful to you. I need you to understand that I am only doing this for myself and has nothing to do with how I feel about you. Personally, I don't understand how this is possible. What about your daughter, Becky? What are you going to tell Holly about this little solo vacation of yours? We always went with the whole family, and suddenly you're going alone. I've already spoken to Holly and explained that some of my friends and I have decided to take a little trip together, and that it will in no way affect our family vacation this summer. She didn't mind. Perhaps she will even be glad if I leave. She giggled at what I thought was a joke. Oh, isn't this such a light-hearted topic? And you think I'm going to let her continue to believe this nonsense? What evidence do you have to the contrary, Henry? I had already shown her brochures about the places where my friends and I would go, and promised to tell her about everything upon our return. All you have is your word, and frankly, Henry, she'd rather believe me and what I told her than what you tell her. Like I said, you thought of everything. You can do whatever you want, and who cares what I think about it? And if I don't like it, then that's just too bad. I don't understand how you expect to stay married to me after this. I already told you, Henry. We love each other, and as soon as I return, everything will return to normal. I'm tired of this nonsense. She clearly hadn't thought about the long-term consequences this might have. Even if we stay married, which won't happen if she agrees to this trip, and even if she doesn't, it won't be the same. I made one last try. Becky, don't leave. We can work on our marriage and try to make things better. Just please don't leave. Henry, I'll go, and that's all there is. But everything will be as before, you'll see. I love you too much to let that change anything. Well, I tried. I can say that this has already changed the situation, but I think you have done your duty. You told me about your plans. I would advise you to have a good time, but unlike you, I prefer not to lie to my spouse. I'll be in the carpentry shop if that's what you're concerned about. Henry, please be careful out there. Operating power tools while upset is very dangerous. I walked down the steps to the basement, ignoring her words and not saying another word. I couldn't believe how stupid she was. Of course, I loved her, but I certainly wasn't going to agree to it, and I was amazed that she would think I would agree. Despite her thoughts, I intended to tell Holly what her mother was up to. If she doesn't believe me, well, I'll have to take a chance. And a trip to Hawaii, of all places. We've been talking about going there for years, but we've been waiting for Holly to get a little older so she can really enjoy it, and now, before we could, she decided to go off with that asshole. Shit. I considered my options. She was right about the divorce, of course. We were in a no-fault divorce state, so I would be on the hook for child support for a few years at least, and probably due to child support since Holly would most likely be left with her mother and the house. I could afford it all. I just didn't like the idea of paying for my wife to sit at home with her boyfriend while I worked and sat at home alone in some apartment. And who knows who she might bring home and subdue Holly. I didn't see any other option but to just stay here until Holly left for college and then get the hell out. But I won't touch her again. I had been sitting in the workshop for several hours when I heard that my daughter had returned home. Usually on Saturdays, she spent time with her friends or with Dean. I had a bright idea, to go right now and tell Holly what her mother was up to when we were all in the room. Maybe she will believe me, maybe not, but she will decide for herself. I started to go up into the house but had not yet left the basement when I heard Holly start talking to her mother, and the very first sentence from her mouth shook my world even more than it already was. Hello, Mom. Have you told Dad about your trip to Hawaii with Mr. Harrington yet? Damn it, she knew everything. Becky didn't tell her the story about the trip with her friends. Holly knew the truth and apparently didn't mind. Who is Mr. Harrington? Did Holly know him? Yes, quite recently. He wasn't too happy and is now sulking in the carpentry shop. This is, in general, what I expected. But he will come to his senses. He really has no choice. I can't believe he was so selfish, Mom. If he truly loved you, he would be happy for you to get your needs met. He'll just have to accept that you need a younger man to give you what you need. As long as he gets his way, he has no reason to complain. Who the hell was this kid? Then I realized that Becky was raising children and had apparently been filling Holly's head with this nonsense for years. She truly was Becky's mini-me. That's what I told him, but he took it personally. His poor, fragile male ego can't accept the fact that he can no longer meet all my needs. I explained to him that people change with age, but he sees in me only his caveman's idea that I am his woman. No, there is clearly no respect here. I'm so glad I introduced you to Mr. Harrington. He is looking forward to this trip. He says he has some special things planned for you. Oh my God. My own daughter not only knew about it, but played an active role in helping her mother cheat on me and seems to revel in my humiliation. How the hell does my 18-year-old daughter know anyone older than her that Becky could date and can afford to pay for a trip to Hawaii? I'll have to figure that out, but at least I have a name. Honey, please don't talk to him about our sex life, okay? It makes me feel uncomfortable, and it's really inappropriate. It was you who started telling me that things weren't working out for Dad, and that it was time to take a lover, like Grandma did, and then you complained that you didn't have the opportunity to meet someone. I think that the fact that I found someone for you gives me the right to some freedom of action. That's probably true, but you still shouldn't talk about it with Rick. You're still underage and he's still your teacher. Jackpot. Okay, Mom, I'll try. I am so happy for you. After this little conversation, my plans took a sudden and radical turn. Now I was not going to stay in the same house with these two treacherous bitches. Of course, not the nicest thing to say to your own daughter, but her actions showed what kind of person she was raised to be, and she is old enough to understand what is right and what is wrong. But there will be no divorce either. Either way, I'd be on the hook for household expenses, at least until Holly graduates in June, but this way I can keep them to a minimum, while in the event of a divorce, I'll pay that percentage of my income that the court will determine, and this will, of course, be more than I would like to contribute. So I would just move out. I would live elsewhere, perhaps sharing an address only with my brother Michael, and keep a household account to pay bills, food, and other expenses. I would keep my email and phone active so my wife and her protege can contact me about anything they want or need, and I can decide if I will cover the costs. Of course, the days of Holly getting pretty much everything she wanted are over, particularly the car she's been wanting to buy for the last couple of years. And after all, I was just about to give up and buy her a car. Since I was involved in finance and the family business, I could easily arrange everything within the next 2 weeks. As long as Becky's credit cards worked when she paid them off, everything was fine. I would also have found a place to live, but that shouldn't have been too difficult. I decided I just wouldn't play these games. I won't pretend that everything is fine, but I won't stomp my feet and make a mountain out of a mountain. All I cared about was that I was now sharing a house with a neighbor and her daughter until I could arrange something else. I didn't win or lose anything, one way or the other. Holly will, of course, find out at some point that I'm aware of her role in her mother's betrayal, and I'll admit I'm curious how she'll react. I walked up the stairs, intending to take a shower and planning to head out to dinner. I'll be damned if, after a day spent, I want to sit down at the table with traitors. As soon as I opened the door to the kitchen, both devilish glances darted in my direction. Maybe I thought there were grins on their faces. Maybe not. It didn't matter. I knew what they thought about me. Holly ran up to me as usual. "Hello, Daddy." She tried to hug me as usual, and I would have hugged her back as usual. But this time I just stood there until she finished. She pulled away, a puzzled expression appearing on her face. "What's the matter, Dad?" I just looked at both of them and silently walked into my bedroom. Well, I guess she won't be mine for long. I'll move my things into one of the spare rooms until it's time to move. But for now, I closed the doors and climbed into the shower. Of course, my wife could not ignore this. Damn those stupid interior locks and their universal keys that are nothing more than glorified screwdrivers. I hoped that by locking the door, she would understand that I wanted to be alone. But that turned out to be too much hope. Becky found her way in and then started telling me off. "What the hell was that? If you want to be angry with me, that's your childish decision. But you don't have to take it out on your daughter. She didn't do anything to you." I just stared at her for a moment before getting back into the shower. "So this is a silent mode, right? How grown up that is. Well, that's okay. When you're done with your little gripe, let me know. By the way, dinner is already ready." She left, slamming the door behind her. I just shrugged my shoulders and went about my business. I no longer cared what she thought or said. I put on trousers and a nice shirt. Coming out of the bedroom, I saw that the girls were sitting at the table and eating what Becky had prepared. They suddenly fell silent when I entered the room, whether because I wasn't supposed to eavesdrop or because they just wanted to see what I would do next. I don't know. I looked in their direction, and Holly smiled widely, perhaps thinking, or at least hoping, that I would come and sit with them and talk like I always do, and maybe apologize. But I turned the other way and walked out the front door. I got into my BMW and was out of the driveway before anyone even left the house, if they even moved. I ate alone at a local steakhouse. I ate slowly and spent a lot of time reading various news articles on the internet. It was just a way to pass the time. I was acutely aware that there were no phone calls from any of the women in my life. I caught a late movie that ended at 12:30 a.m. and got home around 1 a.m. To my joy, everyone was already asleep, and I quickly fell asleep in the guest room. Of course, my good times were short-lived, although it is true that some times are worse than others. I can't deny Becky's physical attractiveness to me. Okay, you're awake. Why the hell did you sleep here last night? Because I was avoiding you, Becky. I had no desire to sleep with you. It seems pretty clear that at least part of you was interested. She reached out to me, but I quickly turned away and slid off the bed. A look of disappointment appeared on Becky's face. Well, Henry, it's still me, the woman you've loved all these years and who loves you with all her heart. Let me take care of you. You're definitely not the woman I've loved all these years, and that's not the heart you shared, Becky. As long as there is another partner in your life, I will not participate in this. It's that simple, and it's your choice. You can either have your husband or your boyfriend. I see that you are not ready to be reasonable in this matter. It's okay, I can wait. I know that you love me, and that eventually you will see the logic in what I say and do. I know you want me to be happy, and eventually you will give me this little thing. She left and walked down the corridor to the bedroom. Sunday passed almost the same as Saturday. I spent most of the day pottering around in the workshop and then went back to dinner. I had to work tomorrow, so I returned at a more reasonable hour. Holly was already in bed, and Becky proposed to me again, but I again refused her advances. The next 2 weeks passed quickly, helped by the fact that I stayed late at work every evening. I've never been so tight before, but every night I tried to find Becky and ask her not to leave, so that later, when it was all over, I could sincerely say that I made an effort. The conversation was always roughly the same. Becky, I want to ask you again, please, not to go on this trip. Call and tell him it's over, and let's work on ourselves. Henry, I understand that this is hard for you, but I want to go, I need to go, and I am determined to go. This is just 1 week, and then you and I will return to our previous relationship. That is, you will continue to meet with him, and although you will behave with a low profile, but, in fact, it is not just you and me. Yes, Henry, I will continue to see him. I'm sorry this hurts you, but this is what I need, and if you love me, you'll understand. This continued until the night before her departure. As for Holly, she finally cuddled with me a couple of days after I overheard her conversation with her mother on that fateful day. She sat on my lap while I was trying to watch a basketball game on TV. Dad, stop avoiding me. For some reason you are offended by me. You always said that we have to talk things out to solve the problem, but if you don't tell me what's wrong, we can't solve it. Please, Daddy, I love you. Holly Ann, I could tell you why I'm angry with you, but I think there's someone else who can tell it much better. Someone else? What are you talking about? Perhaps, my child. You should ask your teacher, Mr. Harrington, what is troubling me. You seem to have become very close to him, even setting him up with your mother so she could deceive me. Maybe he can give you the answers you need. There was a flash of surprise on Holly's face when I said that I knew her role in the whole affair, and that I knew the name of Becky's lover. But the apologetic look I was hoping for never came. Like her mother, she looked at me as if I was needlessly upset about this. So, you know that I introduced them. How do you know? I overheard your conversation with your mother that day when she was telling me about the trip to Hawaii. It's okay, Dad. It's just sex. She doesn't love him. Why does everyone say that? As if it somehow justifies the situation. Marriage is not only about sex and love. Well, she's leaving, and there's nothing you can do about it. Just do your best, and you can keep getting what you deserve. With these words, she left the room. I was shocked. It was enough that she participated in this, and willingly. But the fact that she was so dismissive of me and my feelings, while saying the same nonsense as her mother, simply jarred me. We practically avoided each other for the rest of the time until her mother left. Finally, the great day arrived. Becky was already packed and ready to go, and was waiting in the living room for the taxi to come pick her up. I half expected her to ask me to take her to the airport, but she didn't. Holly was waiting with her, and they were talking excitedly to each other, presumably about the trip and what surprises were in store for Becky. I was back in the workshop and finally heard a car drive up to the house. The door to the basement opened. My taxi is here, honey. I'd like to check out. Bye. This means nothing. You will see. She waited a few more moments, apparently expecting some kind of answer. "Aren't you going to kiss me goodbye?" "Nope. As you wish." Eventually, I heard the door close and the click of her heels on the kitchen floor. A moment later, the front door closed, followed by the sound of Becky's suitcases being packed. And finally, the engine started, and there was a crunch of tires as they rolled out into the street and drove away. It was the sound of the end of my marriage. I agreed to take the week off during Becky's absence. I didn't want Holly to know what I was doing, so I quietly moved things out of the house while she was at school. I actually moved things from the guest room back into the bedroom, thinking that it might make Holly think that I had decided to move back there and then tell her mother. This would lull them into a false sense of security. I deliberately avoided mentioning my move or the word divorce. I wanted Becky to believe that I would be here when she returned, and so that her surprise when she came in and saw that all my things were gone would be complete. She was due back on Saturday evening, by which time I should have been completely gone. A couple of evenings into the trip, and after I had finally moved everything, my wish came true. Since Holly knew I was aware of her involvement in Mom's affair, she made little effort to hide what she did and said. She was in the kitchen preparing herself dinner. I stubbornly refused to do anything for her, and she knew why. My phone rang and the caller ID showed it. Was Becky, so I refused the call. Then I heard Holly's phone ring. Of course, I only heard Holly's version of the conversation. "Hello, Mom. How was your trip?" "Sounds great." "No, he is here. But since he knows who it is and that I introduced you, there is no point in hiding. He moved his things back to your bedroom as soon as you left. He was bluffing, just like you said. I think he's finally come to terms with it." "Okay, I'll tell him. And let me get back to this. While Mom, I love you." She entered the living room where I was sitting. "Mom asked me to tell you hello, that she loves you, and to say again that everything will be as before when she returns." I just looked at her and nodded, accepting her words. The rest of the week went in the same spirit. Over the course of the day, I gradually moved things into my new apartment. I only took my personal belongings, since at the new place I already had food, dishes, and furniture. Everything else from home didn't interest me. It was on Friday evening, the day before Becky returned from her trip, that I decided that my relationship with Holly was completely and irrevocably damaged. She finished dinner, and I was back in the living room, killing brain cells, watching some TV show that didn't interest me at all. Holly came in and sat down next to me. "So, are you ever going to talk to me about anything other than grumbling and monosyllabic answers again?" "You forgave your mother, but what about me?" I turned and looked at her with a questioning expression on my face. "What makes you think that I forgave your mother?" "You returned to the bedroom. Obviously, this means that you are going to sleep there with her, and it means that you have forgiven her." "Holly, I have not and will never forgive your mother for what she did to me. No matter where I sleep, she ruined what we had, and we will never go back to it. I don't understand why you're acting this way. No, she wants it, and this is a fundamental difference. You're barely 18, Holly. You don't fully understand." She stood up and suddenly became very angry. "Just because I'm only 18 doesn't mean I can't understand what my mom is going through." She explained everything to me. I got a little angry too, stood up and raised my voice level to match hers. "Yes, she explained everything to you from her selfish point of view. She decided that she was the only one who mattered and she didn't care what others thought." "This is nonsense, Dad. She was here for you and me every damn day of her adult life. And when she finally decided to do something for herself, everything went wrong for you. She couldn't have hurt me more if she had hit me. I can only assume that the look on my face showed her that she had crossed a line." "Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry." The rage and hatred I suddenly felt towards my daughter in that moment was something I had never felt before. As far as I understood, I no longer had a daughter. "Holly Ann, don't ever talk to me again." I walked out of the living room and up the stairs to my bedroom one last time. Holly cried, realizing the damage she had done in that single moment of anger. "Dad, I didn't want this. Please, Dad, talk to me." I ignored her and walked into my room, closing and locking the door. I stayed up all night collecting the remaining things. I took a taxi from the airport instead of asking Rick to give me a ride. Holly told me Henry was back in the bedroom, so he'd obviously gotten over himself, and I didn't want to risk seeing Rick upsetting him. I finally had everything the way I wanted it, and I didn't want to rock the boat. When I entered the house, the taxi driver carried my things inside. It was almost dinner time, and I expected Henry or Holly to cook something, but there was nothing. Perhaps Henry was planning a dinner to celebrate my return. I heard footsteps on the stairs, and then Holly appeared and rushed to hug me. It looked like she was crying. "Hi, baby. I missed you too, but there's no point in crying over it." She just buried her face in my shoulder, and I heard her sobbing and felt her body trembling. It was clearly more than just that she missed me. I pulled her face away from me. "Baby, what's the matter? Where is Dad?" She was trying really hard to get her emotions under control, so I just waited for her, and after a few minutes she was able to talk. Dad moved out. I drove him away." "What are you talking about, Holly? You told me yourself that he returned to the bedroom." "Yes, but last night we had a fight and I said something very terrible, and this morning he and all his things were gone, and there was that note on the table." Looking at the table, I saw a note that I had not noticed until that moment. With trepidation and a growing sense of horror, I walked up to the table and took it in my hands. It was printed out from the computer, except for Henry's signature at the bottom. I assumed Holly had already read it. I sat down on one of the kitchen chairs and read Henry's note. "Becky." Wow, I thought. Not even "Dear Becky," but just Becky. "Becky, I hope your week in Hawaii, the place we planned to visit with each other, with Rick Harrington, went exactly the way you wanted, because it cost you your marriage and will most likely cost Rick his job. The school board does not accept your relationship. You'll soon find out, if you haven't already, that I've moved out. I only took my personal belongings. I hope to eventually pick up my tools and woodworking supplies, but right now I have nowhere to put them, so I'll have to wait. If this turns out to be a problem, I can just replace them. So don't think you can hold them over my head. I wish I could understand why your sexual needs became more important to you than mine, but apparently that's what happened. I was willing to try to forgive you for a year-long affair if you called off the trip and vowed never to see him again, but our marriage was over when the taxi pulled out of our driveway. I also cannot understand why you decided to involve our daughter in your affair to the point of setting you up with your lover. The contempt and disrespect she now shows me is a clear and obvious result of you telling her about things that should be a private matter between husband and wife. Apparently, you put the same destructive ideas about fidelity and marriage into her head that you put into yours, which were probably planted in her by your own mother. I doubt that Holly will be able to have a normal relationship with a man thanks to your instructions. I only left you and your daughter, yes, I mean our daughter. I didn't shirk my responsibilities. All your apartment bills will continue to be paid automatically as they always have been, and funds will be deposited into your household account so you can pay for other necessary expenses. Don't expect to have a lot of money left over for entertainment. Your pleasures don't bother me anymore, but you obviously have assets you're willing to trade, so maybe you can come to an agreement. I left my email address and mobile phone. Don't expect me to answer when you call. This is primarily for emergencies. If there is anything you want or need, please let me know by email, and I will decide if I am willing to fund the request and let you know. Please don't flood my email with requests to go home or excuses for your actions. I will delete them without reading them and cancel the mailbox if necessary. Michael knows where I live now, and he is under strict orders not to share this information with any of you. In addition, security has been instructed not to allow any of you into my office if you try to catch me there. I'll tell you the same thing I told your daughter when she unleashed her hate speech on me on Friday night. I don't ever want to talk to you, or any of you, ever again. Your selfish, dismissive actions have damaged both relationships, and I will no longer be involved in your lives, at least as much as possible. I'm sure Holly will find someone to walk her down the aisle at her wedding when she finally convinces Dean or some other poor guy to marry her. I have loved you both for so long that it pains me to leave you, but your attitude towards me has reached the point of destruction, and I will not allow you to do this to me. Henry, tears streamed down my face as I finished reading Henry's letter. Everything was not as it should have been. He had to love me forever and understand that this had nothing to do with him or Oos. I knew it was a mistake to involve Holly. But it all started with girl talk. She told me about herself and Dean, and I started talking about Henry and me so that Holly would gain confidence in me. I happened to mention that Holly's grandma, Mom, had had an affair when Dad started to slow down, and that I was thinking about the same thing, and suddenly Holly introduced me to Rick at one of her choir performances. He was certainly handsome and sexy, and I remember having a really good time with Henry that evening. After this meeting, Holly began to talk about him more often. She told me that he is not married and does not want to get married. He wasn't looking for anything permanent, just a little fun. I took the bait and started finding reasons to contact him, just to start a dialogue. One day I invited him to dinner when Henry was out of town for work, citing loneliness. That evening we ended up in his apartment. He didn't have the love that Henry gave me. I spent the night there, and in the morning, we repeated it again. When I returned home the next morning, Holly was there, and it was obvious that I had spent the night with Rick. We talked about it like old friends. I felt like I was back in school again. It was all so exciting. And when Henry returned, he didn't even know what I had done. I somehow managed not to give myself away. At that moment, I realized that I could play on the side with Rick and not let Henry find out about it. And since Rick wasn't a full-time teacher, he had no problem meeting with me a couple times a week, and we were very discreet. This went on for several months. I kept my ears open for any hint that Rick was getting too attached to me. I couldn't let him fall in love with me, but nothing showed up and our relationship continued. We met a couple of times a week, and then I tried to get myself in order before Henry arrived. I kept thinking that something would go wrong, but it didn't. Well, until that fateful day. It was approaching the anniversary of the first time Rick took me to his apartment. Even though we didn't like each other, it was still kind of our anniversary, and he asked me to go to Hawaii with him. Henry was right that he and I were planning to go there. But at that moment, it didn't occur to me. I don't know why, but the thought of spending a week in paradise was very attractive to me. Of course, being a housewife, I could not justify such a long absence. I don't have a job that takes me out of town, and saying I was visiting relatives would be too easy for Henry to check on me. I decided that Henry wouldn't mind, that he loved me so much that he would let me do this for himself, and everything would be fine. Rick mentioned that I could point out to him how bad divorce would be for him if Henry was inclined to do so. The thing is, I really love Henry, so I felt a little guilty about doing this behind his back, and this seemed like the perfect time to bring it all out into the open. I could have Henry's approval because he loved me and wanted me to be happy, and enjoy a week in Hawaii with Rick without feeling guilty. I was surprised when Henry was so against it. I knew that his pride would suffer, and there was no way around it. But I was sure that if I explained that there was no love between Rick and me, that this was just sex beyond what Henry himself needed. And yes, I was. I'm sure that Henry will eventually begin to look at things logically. That is, in my opinion. That's why I told him 2 weeks in advance, to give him time to come to terms with it and give me his consent. Obviously, this did not happen. And yet I was sure that when I returned, and everything was the same for him, he would see that what I did to Rick did not cause him any harm, but such an opportunity never presented itself. Apparently things didn't work out between him and Holly, and he left, although I doubt that was the only reason. I guess I underestimated what Henry's love for me could do, and now the love of my life is gone. But I was a resourceful woman and had no doubt that I could find him and convince him to see things my way. I might even have to cool things off with Rick for a while and convince Henry that it's all over before I take him on again. But I could do it. Henry's brother, Michael, knew his new address. They were friendly, so I doubted that I would be able to persuade him, but maybe his wife, Fiona, would help me. She probably knows or at least can find a new address. Once I find him, I can probably convince him to come back and give me another chance. This is probably why he doesn't want to talk to me. He knows that he won't be able to resist my charm. Plus, he never mentioned that he was going to file for divorce, so he clearly doesn't want to lose me. Most likely, he was just trying to get his point across to me with that "I never want to talk to you again" thing, but I doubt he meant it. He will soon understand that he cannot live without me, and will be glad to hear from me. Yes, I'll start on Monday. I'll call Fiona when Michael is at work. Until I can get Henry to come back to me, to us, Holly and I will struggle. It was a beautiful day, and I decided to relax by the pool. The apartment complex I moved into had a pool, as well as a fitness center and a large common area that could be reserved for parties and large gatherings. I lived here for a couple of months. I spent the first week either in the apartment, unpacking, or at work. For the next few weeks, I was just depressed and just sat in the living room and watched TV. Finally, I decided, as they say, to either live or die. I went to the pool to relax and get some sun. The water was probably still a little cool for me, but lying in the sun and reading would have been just right. I went on a few dates, but no one caught my attention. I was still mourning the loss of my family and missing Becky. Not the one I left, but the one I married and loved for almost 20 years. I had been relaxing in one of the provided sun loungers for about an hour when a shadow fell over me. Opening my eyes, I saw a very attractive female silhouette, although until my eyes adjusted, I could not make out the details. She spoke first. "Hello. I haven't seen you here before. Have you just moved?" "About 2 months ago, but it seems like this is the first time since then that I've seen the light. My name is Henry." "Michelle, nice to meet you. May I join you?" "Michelle, if I've learned anything over the years, it's to always say yes to a beautiful woman's request. Have a seat." She smiled, pushing one of the other sun loungers towards me, right next to me. Since the sun was out of my eyes, I was able to get a better look at her and was very impressed. She had long brown hair and a beautiful figure. She wasn't wearing a wedding ring. Finally, she sat down and turned to me. "So, Henry, are you recently divorced? Or are you just trying to make people think you're divorced?" I looked at her questioningly. "Why are you asking me this? Your finger has both a tan line and a dent where, at least until recently, you wore a wedding ring." "Very insightful. It's interesting that you're looking at my ring finger. No more and no less interesting than when you checked mine a couple of minutes ago." "Crap. I thought I was more subtle. Well, I'm not actually divorced, but I decided to take off the ring and move out while my wife was in Hawaii for a week with her lover." "Oh my God, this must be an interesting story." "It's not that interesting when you live in it, but from the outside I can see how attractive it is." "Is there a chance that you will make peace?" "No. I still care about her. But what she did and the way she did it destroyed any chance of us staying together." "You can tell me about it when you invite me to dinner tonight?" I hesitated for just a moment. "Is there somewhere in particular you would like to go?" "Somewhere nice. And you will ask me to dance. My daughter will be spending the night with my sister, so we can go out as much as we want." "I think this is very good." Michelle looked at me and lifted her sunglasses to make direct eye contact, expecting me to do the same. "Let me make something clear, Henry. I really like you, and I can tell that you like me. But I don't sleep with married men, whether they're divorced or not. So if you ever want to have a chance, you'll have to do something about your marital status." "Well, I think I just got the incentive I was looking for, but maybe we'll see how dinner goes first." We spent another hour relaxing together by the pool. We were mostly silent, I think, with the intention of saving the bulk of the conversation for dinner that evening. I was getting ready for my date with Michelle and was thinking about this unexpected turn of events. I loved being married, but I wasn't sure I wanted to jump into a new relationship right away, especially given the state of my current relationship. There was no doubt that they were over, but there were many unresolved emotions remaining. The most common of them concerned Holly. She said a lot of hurtful things to me, but I understood that she was a victim of her mother's views. In other words, Holly believed that at Becky's age, a woman should take a lover because that's what her grandmother and Becky did, and they told her that's the way it should be. And she expected the man to simply agree to this because that's what her grandfather did. I knew that at some point I would try to improve my relationship with my daughter, despite what I had told her. However, Becky was finished. I knew I wouldn't let Becky stop me from living my life. If that meant paying off Becky for my freedom, then so be it. I wasn't going to let a few dollars hold me back. I picked Mickley up at 6 o'clock in the evening, and we went to an elite Brazilian steakhouse downtown. I've been there several times, but Michelle never has. She wore an emerald green dress that went below her knees but showed a lot of skin on top. She looked impressive, and I told her so. "Well, thank you, sir. You look good yourself." I took her hand and led her to my BMW, opening the door for her, just like my mother taught me. We drove leisurely through the city center and talked about the places we passed along the road. We held hands the whole way, and it was very comfortable. We were seated at a romantic little table in the back alcove, which allowed us some privacy. It's interesting what you can get from a well-placed $50 bill. We settled in and were greeted by our server, an attractive young woman named Kelsey. We ordered drinks and sat down to talk. "Will I have to ask another waitress?" Michelle asked me. "Why do you need this?" "Because if she keeps pestering you like that, I'll claw her eyes out, and I wouldn't want to do that." I looked into her eyes, caught a hint of mischief in them, and was sure she was joking, but I made a mental note to tone it down just in case. I think she realized that the wheels were turning in my head and decided to calm me down. She took my hand. "Henry, I want to say that I like you, and I would like to find out." I didn't mean to seriously offend the poor girl. "I know, but I'm flattered that you laid your claim on me." "So, Henry, what do you do for a living?" "I'm a mechanical engineer. I work as a senior vice president at Alpha Logistics in the city." "And you?" "I work as a loan officer at First National, although I could probably cope just fine with the outrageous alimony and child support payments I receive from my ex-husband. This is payment for the fact that he cheated on me with his assistant and got her pregnant. I can't even imagine how someone decided to cheat on such a beauty like you." "Well, thanks again. Do you have a son or daughter?" "Joni is 8 years old, a third grader at Oakleaf Elementary, and I think she might be smarter than me." "Does your ex take an active part in her life?" "Not at all. My sister's husband has done a good job of being a good role model whenever he can. But we haven't heard from Jay in about 3 years. Do you have children?" "Technically, I have an 18-year-old daughter named Holly, but she seems to share some of her mother's beliefs about the acceptability of cheating, so we don't really communicate much at the moment." "Look, I would like to hear about what happened to your wife, but only if you feel comfortable talking about it." "Actually, I don't mind, although I appear in a very favorable light in her, at least from my wife's side. Don't worry. I intend to find out for myself how good you are at everything." I've laid out the story as best I can, from that fateful "we need to talk" moment to Holly's scream and subsequent early morning departure. For that matter, Henry, I agree with you that she seems to be as much a victim of her mother as you are. She's clearly taken what her mother said to heart, and she seems to realize she's gone too far. I agree, but it really hurt me that my daughter could talk to me like that and apparently have such a low opinion of me, even if it was formed under the influence of Becky. Keep the lines of communication open. Someday she will get in touch. I hope so, and maybe I will too. I'll show initiative. So, are you ready to share your story, Michelle? My story, of course, is not so juicy. My ex, Jay, is the vice president of the Muscles gym chain. He spends a lot of time traveling, inspecting various gyms around the country. A few years ago, he got a new personal assistant, and to make a long story short, they started sleeping together while they were on a business trip, and apparently, his bosses were aware. I was getting emails and things like that telling him to be careful what he did. When he knocked her up, I left him and received very generous alimony and child support, as well as a very good reward from Muscles. I don't have to work, but I like that I have a reason to get up every day. Well, I do not know. I think it's pretty juicy. Maybe not as juicy as an adulterous trip to Hawaii, but still pretty good. You seem to be coping well with your breakup, Henry. At the moment, yes, but at home, in my small apartment, loneliness sometimes overcomes me. It was the right decision, but that doesn't mean I don't miss what we had before. You know, if you feel bad, you can call me and I will come. I say this as a friend, just so you're not alone. We can talk, watch a movie, whatever. I was there and people helped me, and I will help you, okay? I appreciate it, Michelle. Perhaps I'll agree. She took my hand and smiled at me. At that moment, I felt like I had to do something, so I stood up and approached her from the side of the small table, intending to kiss her on the cheek. She pretended that she was ready to accept this kiss. I'm looking forward to more kisses, including longer ones, when you give me a ride home today. I kissed her again and returned to my seat. The dinner was excellent, as was the conversation during which we got to know each other a little better. We went to a local dance club that catered to older people. Michelle was 35 years old, in case you were wondering. Perhaps I was biased, but she seemed to me the most attractive woman in the room, and the guys, those who invited apparently, also thought so about her for the dance. Although one after another, they were refused. We took to the dance floor ourselves several times. We stayed very close and moved very well together. It was almost 2 in the morning when we finally stopped at the door of her apartment. I had a wonderful time, Henry. Me too, Michelle. I felt very good, too. Can we see you tomorrow? Don't you think it's too early? I thought that perhaps in our time there is some kind of unspoken waiting period after all. I haven't dated for a long time, but I just said what I felt. No, I do not think so. If I could do it earlier than tomorrow, I would do it. Good, because I was thinking the same thing. I have to pick it up Johnny at 11 sac, so it should happen before then. I will never introduce her to a guy until we have been together for at least a month. And how many guys has she met already? You will be the first. How about coming to my place for breakfast in the morning? I make a great omelet. I'll be there at 8:30. The knock came at 8:30. And I appreciate the promptness. I opened the door. Michelle was dressed in black yoga pants and a white long sleeve top and looked as fresh as if she had slept for 12 hours. I bought sliced fruit for your omelet. She held the bowl in one hand, and with the other, she pulled me towards her and kissed me. She walked into the kitchen as if she owned it. She looked over the ingredients I had. Bacon, spinach, and cheese for mine, please. She began to place the fruit on plates, while I began preparing the omelet. For some reason, she was looking in all the closets and drawers, and I was about to ask why when she told me, "Our kitchens are arranged almost identically." I don't know why this interests me, but it does. I just laughed and finished serving her the omelet. Yesterday, I immediately felt at ease with Michelle, and today I felt the same. It felt like we had known each other for many years. We finished eating, then sat on the sofa, hugged, and chatted. Very soon it was time for her to leave to pick up Johnny from her sister's house. I walked her to the car and kissed her again. "Call me later," she said, getting into the car. I watched as she drove out of the gate, turned right onto the road, and disappeared from sight. On Monday morning, the first thing I did was make an appointment with a divorce lawyer. I approached my friend at Alpha and asked who he contacted when he was getting divorced a few years ago. "My boyfriend wasn't bad, Henry, but I would advise you to take the girl my ex used. It makes sharks look like guppies, if you catch my drift." He told me the name of his wife's lawyer, and I found her number on the internet. Since Becky didn't want a divorce, I figured she wouldn't make any moves toward one. So the only rush I had was my desire to more fully explore my relationship with Michelle and Michelle herself. I wondered if the divorce should be final, or if it would be enough for her that the divorce was filed and consented to. I made an appointment for Wednesday afternoon, but was told that Ms. Duncan was very busy, and it was only an initial consultation, so I had better make my case quickly. She will then decide whether she will take my case herself or hand it over to one of her assistants. The girl on the phone warned me that she rarely takes men as clients. That evening and the next, Michelle and I talked on the phone. I told her about my visit to the lawyer, and she promised that it would all be worth it. I intended to keep her in it. On Wednesday morning, I was looking forward to meeting with the lawyer when I received a call from Michael. There was nothing unusual in this. We still communicated regularly. "What's up, bro?" "Just letting you know how things are going on the home front. Becky is being very persistent in getting your address. She keeps trying to persuade Fiona to help her, playing the woman card. Fiona, of course, will never tell her anything, but the calls are coming more and more often. Nothing we can't handle, but Becky seems to be getting more anxious and desperate. I really appreciate you and Fiona being my buffer zone, Mike. Let me know when I can do something for you in return. You know this isn't necessary, but maybe we can figure something out. Has she tried anything in your office? She came a couple of times at the very beginning, but achieved nothing. She still calls almost every day, but our secretary now treats it like a game. She enjoys it. The meeting with the lawyer was successful. Denise Duncan went into law to help women get what they are entitled to in divorce court, and that is still her focus. But she realized that there are a lot of women who are the cause of these divorces, and so she spread her wings a little. She firmly states that she will never take on a client who is himself an adulterer. Thanks to evidence obtained from the investigator I hired while the Lovebirds were on the islands, I had enough evidence, and she took my case. It's things like this that make women look bad everywhere. It's no wonder that men are more content than ever to make women playthings when women like them are around, she told me during our consultation. She suggested that by using the private investigator's report as leverage, we could actually influence the issue in our favor. I was tempted, really, but she gave me 20 wonderful years, so I was ready to split everything in half and even take on alimony and child support, which, according to Denise, was very fair of me. But if she was fighting for a divorce, we could bring an account. He was already in the hands of the school board, and I suspect old Rick will be gone soon, if he hasn't already. Becky loved to volunteer, and I suspect that my photographs might have discouraged these family organizations from doing business with her. But, again, this was only possible if she decided to be firm in this matter. That evening, I was pondering the choice of dinner amid the lack of food in the apartment, and had already decided to go outside when there was a knock on the door. I opened it, and Michelle came into the room with a picnic basket and a couple of plates. Taking them from her, I placed them on the table and kissed her. "Wow, baby, that was a good greeting. I missed you too." "Where today, Johnny?" One of her friends invited her to go out for pizza with them. I took a chance that you haven't eaten yet, and wanted to know how the visit to the lawyer went. You want it all to start almost as much as I do. Yes, baby, it is. We need to be able to communicate properly, and that damn marriage certificate of yours is getting in the way, but I don't know how much time we have, so let's eat. She pulled out a couple containers of brisket and potato salad and a small bottle of BBQ sauce, and we started talking and eating. I told her in detail about my visit to the lawyer. You're being kinder than I was capable of, but Jay and I were only married for 9 years. Do you think I should be tougher? This, of course, depends on you, dear. But I like that you know how to be attentive and fair in the current circumstances. I know that if you and I quarrel, you will be reasonable. Jay wasn't very capable of this. She was able to stay with me for about 2 hours before she received a call saying that they were returning from the pizzeria. I walked her about halfway to her apartment and then watched her walk through her door. She was very careful Johnny didn't run into me, so she didn't let me walk her all the way home. I practically swam back to my apartment. I was getting more and more upset. I couldn't believe Fiona didn't want to help me. We women were supposed to have each other's backs. But she flatly refused to try to find Henry's new address. I've tried to follow him home from work several times, but he never goes straight home, or I lose him in traffic. Before that, I met with Rick twice a week, and after Henry left, 3-4 times a week. Damn. I needed some, and Henry wasn't around to do his duty, so it was his fault that I had to turn to Rick more often. But in the last 2 weeks, I've only been able to get Rick to meet me once. He says he's under a lot of pressure from the school board's investigation into our affair, and he's trying not to give them a reason to fire him. The union is also fighting for him, but he thinks it doesn't look good. None of us thought about such consequences. I was starting to think that the trip to Hawaii, as amazing as it was a big mistake. And more money. Henry barely gives me enough to feed Holly and me. We have to have dinner at home every night, and we can only watch movies on premium channels because we don't have money for a movie theater. But even then we ordered too many movies, and Henry threatened to cut off cable if we didn't reduce the number. He is behaving completely unreasonably. Of course, Holly is here now. At least she still has Dean to take her out sometimes, but now I don't have any money to give her to spend, so Dean has to foot the bill every time, and Holly says he's putting pressure on her now to have sex with him as a way to contribute to the relationship. And now she's mad at me for it. And all this because Henry's ego can't handle the idea of another younger man taking care of my needs that he can no longer handle. I still love him, but when he finally comes back to me, I will have to make sure that he can meet all my needs, or he will have to accept the fact that I have someone on my side. This is not discussed. On a bright and beautiful Friday morning at 9:45, my phone rang. Perhaps it had something to do with the fact that Becky received the divorce papers around 9:30. I didn't answer because I was at work and didn't want to talk to her, but I was interested in what she would say, and I immediately listened to the message. It's all out of control, Henry. I destroyed these papers. I won't sign them. We're not going to get a divorce, and you better understand that. We need to meet and talk, to leave all this behind and move on together. You should call me right now. Perhaps I should have been surprised by the aggressiveness and strategy of the attack. I knew that she would fight for a divorce. Why not, since she considers herself right? But I thought that maybe a little humility or a conciliatory attitude would come through. But no, she still thinks that I should accept what she does as a part of life, and that it is my failure, not hers. I haven't said yet that I have a private investigator's report, but it looks like it will be the ammunition that will end this war. He found it surprisingly easy to obtain evidence. When they were here, they were very careful and secretive, but in Hawaii, I guess they decided they could be as open as they wanted. Michelle and I were planning to go out tonight, and I was looking forward to it. We only met a week ago, so I wasn't familiar with Johnny. But tonight, the two of us are meeting Michelle's sister, Lori, and her husband, Jeff. The kids were staying with a friend of theirs, and this was my chance to be tested as my first line of defense. I was nervous but optimistic. Leaving Johnny with the nanny, Michelle returned to get ready. I knocked on her door when it was time to leave and was practically speechless. She was stunningly dressed in a knee-length purple dress with an open back that went to her neck and black shoes with 10 similar heels. We met Jeff and Lori at the restaurant and made all the necessary introductions. We were seated at a square table with Michelle on my right and Lori on my left. I thought it would be more convenient for people to spy on me during the evening. Michelle said that you are in the process of divorce. How is this process going? I looked at Michelle, and it became clear that I was expected to withstand this onslaught alone. No big deal, I thought to myself. She deserves it. My wife received an application today, but she intends to fight me about this. Of course, I can't be forced to stay married to her, but she obviously intends to fight this as best she can. But after all, you have evidence of her betrayal? Yes, although it doesn't mean anything in the divorce itself, except that we can use it to put pressure on her. Her mother is an unrepentant cheater herself, so there won't be much influence there, but the groups she likes to volunteer with might have something to say. But in the end, it could all go through without her signature if I wait long enough. And you expect Michelle to wait for this? I'm not sure if Michelle reacted to this because I was completely focused on Lori. I don't expect Michelle to do anything she doesn't want to do. If she decides she doesn't want to wait, I'll be disappointed, but I'll respect her choice. I really hope she wants to wait for me. I didn't even plan on worrying about divorce, but I'm doing it so I can be with her. I think she's worth the wait for me. Lori just stared at me as my words ran through her head. Jeff grinned slightly, as if he was impressed that I didn't wilt at the right angle. Okay, for now I approve of you, but you better be able to stand up for yourself on the dance floor when you and I are there. I'll take you into circulation. Looking forward to it. The evening went wonderfully. Michelle and I were attached to each other the entire evening, except when we switched dance partners. It was clear that Jeff and Michelle had danced in the past, but he was her brother-in-law, so why not? Lori was built differently than Michelle. She was taller and slimmer with long, straight blonde hair. Michelle was both bustier and rounder in the hips than Lori. In general, it was difficult to believe that they were sisters, although I did not say anything like that. During the dance, we also talked a little. I hope you don't mind, but Michelle told me what your wife did. I'm really sorry. I appreciate it. This took a huge toll on my self-esteem, but Michelle made up for it beautifully. She really likes you, you know. I haven't seen her like this since she met Jay. Please don't hurt her. I won't. She means a lot to me, and I really like her too. When we returned to the apartment complex, Michelle had to get in the car and pick up the children, since Lori and Jeff had 2 children, Alexis, 10 years old, and Marcus, 7 years old. They were with a nanny. She would take them away for the night so Jeff and Lori could have some alone time. I kissed her goodnight as she climbed into the car and took another lonely walk back to my apartment. I had just settled into bed when there was a knock on the door. I saw Michelle through the peephole and opened it. She kissed me. Call me tomorrow. And at that very moment, she disappeared. And I went to the bedroom to relieve tension. I didn't have money for a lawyer, but the paperwork said that Henry would cover the costs within reason, since he was filing a lawsuit, and I was able to find a lawyer who took the case, knowing that payment would be made after the fact. She told me a few things I didn't know. First of all, regardless of whether I sign the papers or not, the divorce will still take place. In such a case, the judge would determine the terms, but she predicted they would likely be very similar to those Henry proposed. Henry gave me a house for the rest of Holly's senior year and a year after that, plus reasonable child support for 3 years, and child support until June. After that, the house will be sold or I can buy it, or vice versa. But he said that he was not interested in this. I couldn't believe this was happening. Why did I risk losing my marriage over something that had no long-term impact on Henry? I tried to set up a meeting with Rick next week, but he turned me down. He said it was only interesting because I was married, and he got a kick out of it. But now that Henry is gone and I'm getting a divorce, it's no fun for him. Henry was right. He was an asshole. And Holly is just a disaster. She misses her dad very much. She and I were always close, but they did a lot of things together, and she missed him being a part of her life. Everything is not as it should be. It's been 2 weeks since I met Michelle's sister, Lori, and other than the ticking clock, not much has happened in the divorce matter. Becky still refuses to sign the papers and wants counseling, but it's just a waste of time. Michelle and I meet whenever possible. Sometimes it's just a few minutes after she's laid down. Johnny sleeps. But thanks to Lori, we manage to meet a couple times a week. She says all she wants in return is for us to reciprocate our feelings someday. I told her to consider it done. It's Saturday and Lori is babysitting Joni again, and I took Michelle to dinner and a concert at a club downtown. Looking back, I understand that sooner or later, this had to happen. We were eating quietly, holding hands, when I heard a scream from the other end of the restaurant. "Get your damn hands off my husband right now!" Without prizes, you can guess that it was Becky shouting from the other end of the hall. Turning towards the voice, I saw her walking towards us, and behind her, several of her friends looked justifiably embarrassed. Finally, Becky reached the table. "Looks like I got you, bastard. You're still married to me, you know, and now I have you in my arms." "Yes, Becky, you caught me having dinner with my neighbor. Congratulations on the opening." "Oh, don't try to tell me it's only dinner. I'm sure you'll have even more at home later. Just look how she's dressed. She's probably giving herself away for nothing." Michelle sat with a puzzled expression on her face until she was attacked. But in response, she remained calm. "Actually, I respect wedding vows, even if they are not mine. We haven't done anything yet, but I look forward to the day when we can do it. Thanks for leaving him, Becky." The way she said Becky sounded with a hint of disgust and pity, which only made Becky even more angry. The staff had to force her away from us, and as a result, she was kicked out of the restaurant. As she was being dragged back, Becky managed to say, "Stay away from him, bitch," before she was thrown out. I wondered if her friends stayed with her for the rest of the evening. "So this is your wife, right?" "I'm so sorry, honey. It's not worth it. This would be a great story to tell Lori and Jeff." She didn't bother me at all, but she's definitely angry. The rest of the evening was less dramatic and we had a great time. This time we chose not to dance, but just sit and listen to the band, since it was more of a music venue than a dance hall. She spent a lot of time sitting on my lap. As she wrapped her arms around me, I felt her intoxicating scent. At first it was her perfume, but as it wore off, it became more and more natural Michelle. We held hands tightly on the way home, and when I pulled into the parking lot of an apartment complex, I made a decision. I walked her to the apartment, and we stopped at the door. "Michelle, honey, I need to tell you something." She raised her piercing brown eyes and gazed into mine, her hands clasped tightly behind my neck. "What exactly, baby?" "I never thought it would be possible, especially so soon, but I want you to know that I'm completely in love with you. You are my last thought at night and first in the morning. I know we'll have to deal with some things over the next few months, but I want you to know how I feel." She kissed me. "And I love you too, Henry." "True. I love it. You are a wonderful person, and I can't believe you are mine. And you're right that we have a lot to overcome, but none of it will stop us from being together in the long run. If things had been a little different, we'd be heading to my bed right now, and when that time finally comes, I know we'll both think it was worth the wait." We stood on the threshold of her house, just hugging and kissing. We both knew that if we went inside, even just to get comfortable, we can abstain. But in the end, we had to go our separate ways. After kissing her again, I let her go. My lawyer called me this morning, and it looks like Henry has upped the ante. His lawyer sent me copies of photos of Rick and I in Hawaii. Apparently, Henry asked a detective to follow us, and the evidence turned out terrifying. They couldn't be used in a divorce, but they could be used to make my life very difficult. Assuming that the divorce was final, and there was nothing to indicate that this was not exactly what we were going for, then these photos could make it very difficult for me to get a job. Perhaps attacking them in a restaurant was not the best decision. Apparently, I greatly miscalculated and mistook my husband's kindness for weakness. I was sure that he would not risk losing me and would agree to share me. As wonderful as Rick was, he wasn't worth my marriage. I just didn't think it would end like this. A little over a month has passed since my trip, and things continue to go wrong. Dean broke up with Holly today. They went on a date, and I managed to give her a few dollars. When he appeared, her face brightened. She really likes him, and I think they will get married someday. I know she is only 18 years old, but I think they are so good together. But she burst into tears when he dropped her off. She immediately ran to her bedroom and slammed the door. I got up to see what was wrong, and I had to just lie with her for about 15 minutes until she calmed down. Dean abandoned me, Mom. Are you serious? Everything was going so well. What's happened? What did he say? Well, I told you that he kind of insisted that we have sex, but I kept saying no. In the end, he said that he expected more from me, looking at my mother, and I'm just like you in every other way. This outraged me. She continued, well, I told him what you told me, that it is perfectly normal for a woman to need a lover, because as men and women get older, men's abilities decrease and women's needs increase. Then he asked me if that meant he could expect the same from me if we got married. I didn't know how to respond, and he simply said, I thought so, and then said he was breaking up with me because I had already made it clear to him that I was going to cheat on him. I had no idea that this became known throughout the city. Then I realized that school disciplinary hearings for misconduct are public, so someone must have gotten their hands on the transcript of Rick's hearing, and my name was probably prominently featured there. Crap. Look, I'm not stupid. I know that, even though it makes sense for a woman to have a lover, society still frowns upon it. But when you do something like that, you don't expect to get caught, so you just don't think about the possible consequences. And again, I thought that Henry would allow it, even if he wasn't happy about it, and I also didn't think that he would say anything anywhere, because it would mean to everyone that he couldn't do it anymore. Everything went wrong. I did as my mother suggested. She said Dad was angry for a while too, but finally decided it would be too embarrassing to risk it, becoming public knowledge, and she was with Uncle Leo for several years until he met that woman on whom I eventually married. I don't remember her name. Of course, things have changed a little between her and her father since then, but she said it was worth it. I had to constantly persuade Henry to talk to me and come back to me. Rick was gone, and I could promise that I would never see him again and tell him that I only wanted him. And once Henry feels comfortable again, I can find a replacement for him, but this time I will know better than to say anything about it. Tomorrow I'll try again to follow him home from work. I spoke with Denise Duncan today, and Becky still refuses to sign the divorce, saying she wants another chance to talk to me and work things out. Denise said that I should meet her face to face and try to convince her that I was not going to put up with her. Otherwise, all this will drag on for months while she files appeals and generally delays time in every possible way. The best I could offer was to think, because I had other things on my mind. What else was on my mind, you ask? Well, it's been 5 weeks since I met Michelle, and I've fallen madly in love with her. A month has passed, and tonight I will finally be introduced to Michelle's daughter, Joni. Michelle told me that today's meeting is unlikely to be decisive, but I am very worried because I know that Johnny comes first, and I need her to be on my side. We started with a trip to Chuck E. Cheese for dinner to introduce ourselves to each other on neutral territory. I was driving, and Michelle, as usual, was holding my hand in front, but from the back seat it seemed to me that my eyes, Johnny, riveted on me. Although every time I saw her in the rearview mirror, she seemed to be smiling and just enjoying the ride. We entered the restaurant, ordered food, and bought game tokens. Before we had time to grab a table, Johnny. She grabbed my hand and pulled me into the play area. Are 8-year-old girls really that strong? Without further ado, I was led into a maze and a game of tag, which I lost horribly. At some point, I lost sight of her and finally found her sitting on the chairs for one of the games. Where are you? You're so fast. She looked at me with her big brown eyes. Will you be my new dad? I knelt down in front of her and took her small hands in mine. I remember doing this many times when Holly was little and had a big question she needed an answer to, and I thought wistfully of better times. I'd like to be one if you don't mind, but you don't have to decide right now. I think I would like you to be my new dad. My friends' dads don't want to climb with them, but you did. And Mom says you make her happy, so I don't mind. I felt tears welling up in my eyes and realized it was a combination of what I had found and what I had lost. I asked her to hug me, and she hugged me tightly. I was very impressed with Michelle's girl. Michelle, of course, was watching us like a hawk. We returned to the table to eat. I was seated on the other side of Michelle and Johnny, but that was okay. I looked at them. They were so similar. Johnny was, well, she was Michelle's mini-me, just like Holly was Becky's mini-me. The rest of the evening passed in complete delight. We spent hours playing the slot machines, spending tons of tokens and earning tons of tickets, enough to buy a fancy Barbie doll at the Redemption Center. After that, we went to an ice cream parlor and returned to the apartment. It was late and Joni was tired, so we put her to bed, and I blessed her with a request to read her a story. After putting her to bed, Michelle and I sat down on the couch together. She pressed herself close to me. "Are you ready to become a daddy to a little girl again?" "You know, at my age I had my doubts, but now that I've met her, I can't imagine anything else." What about one of our children?" She looked up at me, and I lowered mine to meet hers. "Nothing will make me happier than the birth of a child, Michelle, and only marriage with you and the opportunity to become a dad to Johnny will compare with this." A wide smile spread across her face. She said that she remembers her words, but she can no longer wait for my divorce. We made love. I turned off my phone for the evening, only to find that I had a missed call and a voicemail from Denise. Does it ever not work? I listened to the message, and my day became even better, which I never thought was possible. "Henry, this is Denise. Becky's lawyer just called me and said that she has decided to sign the papers and will come to my office next week. You don't need to be here, but I will let you know when everything is ready." That night, I slept very well. My marriage was coming to an end. At this point, it seemed like a foregone conclusion. This morning, I was going to fight him to the end. But as I watched Holly spend another day in her room, crying because Dean left her, I realized that this was all causing her too much pain. And where will this lead me? In the end, I will still get divorced, but in doing so, I could ruin my daughter. Therefore, I made a very difficult decision to agree to sign the papers. And as a mature 41-year-old woman, I chose the most appropriate way to cope with the pain that this decision caused. I went to a club, got drunk, and went home with the first person who asked. So I woke up in someone else's apartment. I sent Holly to her friend Leslie's for the night and was grateful that it didn't cost Holly her best friend. The guy was still sleeping, so I quickly got dressed and quietly left the house. My car was still parked outside the club, and I called a taxi to pick it up. I went home, took a shower, and then thought that, at that moment, I wanted nothing more than to go to bed. So I did. I spent the entire weekend with Michelle and Joni. We went to the zoo on Saturday and went to Lori and Jeff's for dinner on Sunday. Joni spent most of the day with Alexis and Marcus, but they grew up together, so it wasn't surprising. Jeff was a nice guy and seemed to know his way around a grill. He was taller than me, 180 cm, and in pretty good shape. He played baseball in college and had just turned 40, while Lori was 38. While the sisters socialized and looked after the kids, I spent some time at the grill getting to know Jeff. He and Lori had been married for 15 years, and he was completely in love with her. She is still the reason I get up in the morning and do what I have to do. I want her to be proud of me and happy that she married me. I'm sure you're doing everything right, Jeff. I haven't spent much time with her, but she has that complete confidence that comes from knowing that she has achieved her goal. I've known Michelle for a long time. She's crazy about you, Henry. You got a good woman. She was completely devoted to Jay, and that's why what he did hurt her so much, you know? She devoted herself completely to him. I know what your wife did, and I'll bet my life that Michelle will never even take a step in that direction, let alone go all the way. I appreciate that thought, Jeff. Let me assure you that I don't think Michelle would do anything like that. Otherwise, I would not be able to give myself to her as completely as I do now. I was in a good mood about how both parts of my life were developing. With any luck, I could get Becky's signature on the paperwork and submit it this week, and then I would just have to wait 90 days until I could bring Michelle to the altar, which I plan to do as soon as possible. My head was spinning. I think it's Wednesday, but to be honest, I've lost count. I've been getting drunk and going home with different men every night since last Friday when I finally decided to give in and sign the divorce papers. Luckily, the last few guys were better than that first one, so at least I was able to drown my sorrows. But today, if I understood correctly that today is Wednesday, I have to sign the papers. I don't know what I'll do without Henry. I love him so much. I just needed something more for a while. I didn't have feelings for Rick. I was supposed to spend the rest of my life with Henry. Growing old together, spoiling our grandchildren, traveling the world. It was all in the plans. And now I will only have loneliness and heartache from what a fool I was. And God forbid if Henry ends up with that beautiful brunette with whom I saw him in the restaurant. She was absolutely gorgeous and younger than me. How much more painful would it be if I ruined my life and at the same time gave the only man I loved to a woman like this? I don't think I could live with it. I went to my lawyer's office and we went to see Henry's lawyer together. I hoped he would be there, but he wasn't. And when we got down to business, I was sad to see that he had already signed the papers weeks ago. He couldn't wait to get rid of me, and now I can hardly blame him. Maybe someday I'll have the opportunity to apologize in person, but for now I just let my lawyer look at the papers and sign them when she confirms that everything is fine. I ate dinner alone that evening, as Holly was spending more and more time away from home, probably to distance herself from me. Then I got dressed again and went to the club. Again. I found a table with 3 young guys and told them I was there to offer them a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and all they had to do was pay for their hotel room. I think we left a vapor trail behind us when we left the bar. I was completely sober. This was my retribution for what I had done. After the documents have been signed and filed, the waiting period is 90 days, and 30 of them have already passed. My love for Michelle and Joni only grows, and we have gotten to the point where I call her my daughter, and she calls me Daddy. It still warms my heart every time I hear it. Lori and Michelle are already planning their wedding. It won't be huge, but they want lots of flowers and a good reception. They have carte blanche, as far as I understand. I proposed the day after Becky signed the papers because I couldn't wait to put a ring on Michelle's finger. The only thing I had a hard time coming to terms with after what Becky did was Holly's role in this. Becky did what she thought was necessary and took steps to achieve this goal, but this was understandable since she was the direct beneficiary of her actions, so there was a selfish component to her actions. But Holly didn't see any direct benefit, other than perhaps a happier mother. So I found it difficult to reconcile the apparent happiness she got from seeing her father being humiliated. I guess it was just an unintended consequence. As a woman, she could relate to the needs that she said her mother had, and she derived a certain happiness from Becky having those needs met. The fact that I objected to this was unfortunate, but did not detract from her happiness towards her mother, probably due to the fact that her mother presented taking a lover as inevitable and a kind of rite of passage for the female sex. So in my heart, I felt that she was another victim of Becky's self-centered and destructive views, but I found it difficult to reconcile the joy in her voice with the disdain with which she treated my feelings on the matter, as if all that mattered was her mother's happiness. This really hurt me and became the main factor in our further separation. One of the things that appealed to me about Michelle having a daughter was the opportunity to do it all over again, and maybe, at least in my mind, do it right. When Holly was little, I spent a lot of time at work and left the bulk of her upbringing to Becky. It wasn't that uncommon, and I didn't have any problems. Holly and I still had things to do together that we did just ourselves. When she was younger, she was an avid soccer and volleyball player, and we spent many hours honing those skills. But this was not the time or place where life lessons were taught, at least as far as the values that underlie marriage and successful relationships were concerned. I tried to teach strength and willpower, never give up and fight against difficulties. I left it to Becky to instill other values, and it backfired, at least in that regard. I wondered if anything could be fixed at all. Soon my marriage will be officially completed. I've been marking this date on my calendar for weeks. It seemed to me that now that Henry was gone, I had nothing to live for. Holly, now 18, spent most of her time away from home. She, of course, no longer needed me. Just a few months ago, I had everything. A husband who adored me, a wonderful daughter who loved me, and lovers. And then my own arrogance, my own sense of self-worth, caused it all to collapse. I have no idea how I'll cope when it's all said and done. In my mind, as long as Henry and I were legally married, there was still a chance, but once the divorce was final, it would all be over. I haven't spoken to him since the day I flew to Hawaii. Well, not counting my outburst at the restaurant that day, but I don't think that's what you'd call a conversation, and no one was willing or even able to tell me what he was doing. Now, was he still with the beautiful brunette he was with that evening? Were they serious, or was he just using her to forget me? Is everything going well at work? I hated the idea that I might have influenced his work, and I hoped that his career would not suffer. It was all harmless, or so it was planned, and the fact is that until that day, everything was harmless. Henry didn't suspect anything, and Holly supported me. No harm done. I suppose in the end, they could have figured us out without going to Hawaii, but I was stupid when I openly spoke about it myself. And here I sit, with an ever-current glass of wine in my hand, okay? Sometimes I put it on the nightstand. Today I haven't found a guy yet, but he's out there somewhere. I've never gone home alone at the end of an evening when socializing was on my mind. Sometimes it even gives strength, and is not a desperate attempt to drown grief and drown out your feelings for a few hours, as it really is. The divorce would be finalized in a few days, and my wedding to Michelle was scheduled in 3 weeks, giving me time to get a final divorce decree so I could then get a marriage license. Michelle and Lori went shopping with the kids this morning while I cleaned out my apartment. Michelle's apartment lease expired last month, and she switched to month even though I still had a few months left. We had already bought a house nearby, so Joni wouldn't have to worry about leaving the school district, which was great, one of the best in the state, and we were going to close on the apartment next week. But even though Michelle and I spent every night together at her place if we had Joni, and at my place if we didn't, Michelle insisted that we wait until we were married before officially moving in together. So she kept her apartment, and I kept mine. And since money wasn't an issue, I accepted it. I received a message that they were returning and wanted to make sure I was home. It seemed strange, but I confirmed that I was at home and was looking forward to her return. The answer was a smiley face. Michelle had her own key. Plus, I usually left the door unlocked, especially when I was waiting for her. So when she knocked on the door when she returned, I was surprised. Maybe she is playing some kind of game, I thought. So I joined the game and opened the door. I couldn't be more surprised if God himself were standing on the other side of the door. "Hello, Daddy." I just stared at my daughter in stunned silence. We both looked at each other through the gap created by the door frame until Holly began to fidget with the awkwardness of the situation. "Can I come in, Dad?" I literally shook my head to get out of the trance I had fallen into at the sight of Holly standing in front of me. I stepped back and allowed her to enter. She walked past me into the living room. Glancing at the empty passage, I closed the door. I turned to look at my daughter for the first time in almost 3 months. I saw that she was doing everything she could to hold back her tears. "What are you doing here, Holly? I thought I was clear enough when I said I didn't want to hear from you anymore after what you said." "I made a mistake, Dad. I need to talk to you. And if after that you don't want to see me again, I won't bother you anymore. Please." "Okay, Holly, I'll listen. But first I need to know how you found out where I live." "It was your girlfriend, Michelle. How did this happen?" "She just called me. She introduced herself and said that you guys were getting married and that it was time for you and me to talk about what happened." "Is it true? I hope you're not angry with her. She also said that I would have a younger sister. This was no longer the same snotty, dismissive child I had spoken to last time. I was intrigued enough by this change to continue the conversation. Inviting her to get comfortable on the sofa, I offered her something to drink and poured each of them a glass of iced tea. "Okay, girl, what do you want to say?" "Dad, I'm very sorry that everything turned out this way and that I said it, especially the last one. I thought that Mom deserves what she does and that you are just selfish for hurting her like that." "So what made you change your mind?" "A few things. The first was when Dean broke up with me." "Dean broke up with you? You had a good time together. When did it happen?" "It was a few weeks after you left." I still thought, well, you're being an asshole. Mr. Harrington was fired, someone found out why, and soon the whole school knew about it. And since my mother could not give me money for expenses, he had to pay for everything, and he began to push me to have sex with him. This alerted my parenting instincts. I'll have to remember to talk to Dean's parents. I knew them well before Holly and Dean started dating, and I knew they wouldn't appreciate it. "And you?" She looked at me like the sweet girl I knew before all this started. "No, Daddy. I don't know if it was visible, but the relief I felt inside was palpable." "What else happened?" "Well, since I was still defending what Mom did, he asked if that meant I would cheat on him when we were older. I didn't know how to respond, and he assumed that meant I would, and left me. Would you change it?" Would I cheat on him, I mean? Because no matter how hard your mom tries to get out of it, that's just the way it is. No, Dad, I wouldn't. I noticed the repetition of the word dad. I thought a lot about that day. Even then, I would probably say that it all depends on the situation. Maybe things wouldn't be the same with you and Mom as they are now, and I wouldn't think that I needed it. I don't know. But now I can say for sure that the answer is no. This is good. Is there anything else? Yes, Daddy. I spend a lot of time with Leslie's parents, just talking to them and stuff. I've lost a lot of friends because of this, but Leslie's family is still close to me. I explained to them that my mother told me that a woman takes care of her family all her life and has no right to do anything for herself. They surprised me by saying that she acted like a bad wife and a bad mother. You will not receive any objections from me. They talked to me about wedding vows and promises and stuff. But they also talked to me about what they had been through. When Leslie was little, Mr. P got sick, very sick. And while he was sick, he couldn't. At one point, he told Mrs. P that he understood that she had a hard time going without sex, and that if she needed to find someone to do it with, he would understand and would not be upset with her. She says she almost knocked him out when he said that. She asked what kind of wife she must be to be so selfish when he was sick. It wasn't that he didn't want to, he just couldn't, and that was what all those vows were about. You remain faithful and support each other through good times and bad. She never even thought about doing that to him. And they made it clear that Mom was only thinking about herself when she did what she did. The fact that you were cared for didn't justify her being with someone else. You know, Holly, many years ago, even before you were born and even when you were little, I had a much greater sex drive than your mother, but I didn't insist on it. We did it when she was ready. Phew, Pope. I mean, by your mother's logic, I could find another woman whenever I want if your mother isn't ready or interested. Do you think she would be okay with that? She thought about the example I had just given and came to the only reasonable conclusion. No way, Daddy. She would probably leave you. And I would have been acquitted, and that's exactly what I did. Daddy, I'm so sorry that I believed my mother's words without thinking. If I had thought about it, I would probably have realized that this was wrong. I was just overwhelmed by the excitement she felt and the fact that we had a secret. I was wrong. Tears began to gather and run down her cheeks. I handed her a napkin, pulled her towards me, and hugged her tightly. I forgive you, baby. Really, I forgive you. I hope you understand that I needed you to understand for yourself that this was wrong. If I tried to tell you this myself, it would only turn your mother against me. You had to figure out for yourself what was right and what was wrong. I'm happy that you finally realized this. Does this mean I'll bring you back into my life, Dad? Of course that means, honey. In fact, I have a wedding soon, and I really need you. I know. Michelle has already asked me to be a bridesmaid. Leslie will be there, too. I can't wait. What an insidious devil she is, I thought to myself. Another reason why I love her. She knew exactly what to do, and she certainly wasn't going to stop me from doing the right thing. But when I looked at Holly, I realized she had something else on her mind. What's the matter, honey? You want to say something else? It's difficult, Dad. I don't want to be selfish, but... Just say it, Holly. We will solve everything. Dad, can I live with you and Michelle? My first thought was that she was tired of having so little money because I only gave Becky enough so they could buy groceries. So I went this route. You know, after the divorce, Mom will have more money. I will pay more in alimony and child support. That's not the point, Dad, just... Holly was very worried, and I realized that more than anything, she wanted to get away from her mother. Holly, what happened? Why do you want to leave your mom and live with me? Dad, she's not herself. She always seems to be drunk, or at least getting close to it. Half the time, she doesn't even come home until the next morning. And when she comes at night, some strange guy drops her off and Mrs. Malone has to take her to get the car. Does she bring men into the house? I was seething with this thought. Not because I cared what Becky was doing, but because Holly might be in danger. No matter how angry I am with her, I wouldn't want any harm to come to her. Don't know. I've never seen them, but she probably can when I'm not around. I often spend the night at Leslie's. Good baby. Of course, you can stay with us, but something needs to be done. We can't let your mom do this to you. I wrote to Michelle and asked her to come over immediately. Holly and I were sitting on the sofa when Johnny came in. I thought, and Holly laid her head on my shoulder. So, I guess the wedding is still on, and you're not mad at me for inviting Holly. You won't get away with marrying me that easily." She sat down on the other side of Holly, and Johnny climbed onto my lap. "Honey, we have a problem." I relayed what Holly told me about Becky and her choices. She had clearly entered a self-destructive phase, and we had to do something to help her. No matter who else she was Holly's mother and gave me many wonderful memories. Michelle, as always, was completely supportive. "Do what you have to do, baby. It is important. Do you want me to go with you?" For some reason, it seems to me that this will only worsen the situation. I want to leave Holly here too. I think this is something I need to take care of. I drove up to my old house for the first time since that day. The grass was a little withered, but otherwise everything was fine. Becky's car was parked in the driveway as usual. There were no other cars. I hoped this was a good sign. I rang the bell. The house may have remained the same, but the woman who answered the door was not the same as the one I left. Her hair stood on end and looked dirty. She had lost weight and was wearing an old robe. "Henry! Oh my God, honey, you're back. Please tell me you're taking me back. Please, I'll do anything." "No, Becky, but I want to help you. Holly told me what's going on here. You can't continue like this." She looked at me, trying to process what she had just said, and then it was as if a switch had been flipped. "Have you talked to Holly? Have you forgiven her and allowed her back into your life? And what about me? Where is my forgiveness?" "I forgive you, Becky, but..." "Then why don't you want to take me back? I love you, Henry. I need you. Please, Henry, please, Becky." I hated yelling, but I needed her to calm down. "Becky, I'm not here to bring you back, but I'm here to help you." I took Becky to the emergency room, and her blood alcohol level was very high. They consulted a psychiatrist and had her urgently hospitalized for 72 hours as a potential danger to herself. While she languished there, Michelle and I researched rehab centers that could help her and visited several before settling on one. Treatment was supposed to be voluntary, and I hoped that we could convince her to go there. This was 7 years ago. As I prepared to walk Holly down the aisle to marry her boyfriend of 4 years, I reflected on those events. It was a difficult journey, but mostly we made it through. Michelle and I are still happily married. Johnny, she recently turned 15 and idolizes her older sister. She looks beautiful in her purple satin dress today as Holly's maid of honor. She's not allowed to date yet, but there are a few boys she talks about, and she's had a boyfriend or two. But that's only during school hours. Amelia is 5 years old, and she idolizes Johnny almost the same. As Johnny idolizes Holly, she will start school soon and is already reading some basic words, thanks to her big sister's bedtime stories. Tamara is 3 years old, and she doesn't sit still for a minute until she falls asleep. Literally 1 minute she is running at full speed, and the next she is already lying on the sofa. Every evening I carry her to her crib, every evening. I found my beautiful wife already seated, sharing the mother of the bride's seat with Becky. Becky's husband, Martin, is sitting right behind them. Her first rehabilitation did not go well, but after she contracted several illnesses and lost consciousness several times, she sought help herself, and this time everything worked out. Michelle is 8 months pregnant, but every day she manages to look more and more beautiful. If you're wondering, yes, it's another girl. We're still debating names, but there's a good chance Aunt Lori will get her namesake. Of course, sometimes I miss Becky, who I married, and the plans we had. I always thought we would be married for 50 years and watch generations of family members pass through our home, but it wasn't meant to be. But we're all friends, and even spend a day with Becky and Martin once every month or two. It's not what I expected, but it's a good life. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.